It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
Oh, let's review.
We'll analyze the scene
Sounds holly jolly to me.
before it's over. Let's begin.
Bomb. Oh, I'm sorry, Rohit. I don't have that written down. You have to do a bomb, Rohit. Do another bomb.
Boom.
Yeah, you see, it's like a bomb. Bomb.
Boom.
All right. Oh boy. Wow. All right. How we doing, everyone? Welcome to Seasonal Shenanigans. Let me actually get the intro here. That's right, folks. Since the Christmas season is upon us, we thought the way to celebrate and get into the holiday spirit would be with some holiday reviews. 6 to be exact, selected and arranged for your Yuletide pleasure. So, silver up those bells, light the multicolored lights, and go out and build a snowman as we engage in some. Rohit, you got to time me on this and say it at the same time for dramatic fashion. Seasonal Shenanigans. We'll work on it. We'll workshop it. All right. Go Gios. I don't know about Rohit. I can't speak for Rohit just yet, but for me personally, I think this movie's a little better than Fred Claus. I like Fred Claus, but I think this movie's a little better than Fred Claus. All right, folks, we are here to talk about The Holdovers. It is our first installment of Seasonal Shenanigans 2023. We are in the thick of the Christmas season. This is the new Alexander Payne film. Rohit, for me, actually, Heber Colby's in the comments. He said he's excited about this one. Colby and I actually kind of had a chat about how he's East Coast, I'm West Coast, and so I kind of feel like, just to lay out my feelings on this movie, I like this one a lot. Like, this movie's definitely like up there for me with the 2023 stuff. It's not my top of the year, but it's I'd say it's kind of like, you know, scratching the top 5 for me. It's I really, really appreciate it. But the thing is, I am very much West Coast. Colby's very much East Coast. And so it's like, because of that, me and him have like almost like flipped opinions about this and Sideways. We both really like both movies, but like, I love Sideways and he loves this, and I really like this, and he really likes Sideways. So I feel like that's very much kind of like an East Coast West Coast thing going on there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if you know this. I presume you do, but for the audience at home, I originally grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and came to Texas for law school. As of now, I've been to Texas the past 6 years. So I guess the funny thing is that this is my first Alexander Payne film. Like, I've known of him as a director, I know of his movies, but I never had the opportunity to actually watch any of his movies before. So this is kind of a treat for this to be my first film. Um, and you know, uh, I guess like for me, it'll be funny if Alexander Payne ever gets to direct a movie set in Texas or in the South. Maybe that's my passion. But no, I like I don't know about you, Tiki. For me, I was made aware of this movie because me and a good friend of mine, we have a subscription to the Alamo Draft House in my area, and we utilized a lot. Now I think we're like watched like 35 to 40 movies at this point this year, which is a lot for like the average person. But and the Holdovers was just a thing that would just play off, like the trailer would just play often, especially in the holidays, and we watch a lot of indie movies, so that probably demographic would have been interested in this. Um, so I was really excited to see it, and I know you wanted to see it, so I figured I'd take the opportunity, and I have to say this is definitely in my top 10 movies of this year.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, let's get into it. You know what? I know that Dragon has a Stu background, but I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of background on this. You guys will have to excuse me on that. So let's just dive into it, Rohit. We can pretty much have a free-form conversation on it. Would you like to set up the premise for everyone? Because, you being a lawyer, I feel like you're good at presenting situations and scenarios in a very eloquent way.
I'll be happy to do so.
Okay, thank
Basically,
you.
to conceive this film, this is a film basically that could, in some ways, be considered a time capsule. It's very much a film that's stylized similar to films that were produced and made and distributed in the 70s. And as such, this film, I think, in particular, takes place in either 1970 or 1971. This was in a preparatory school that I don't know if it's in New England or just in the
It's in New Hampshire.
New Hampshire, correct. And basically, the premise of the movie is that there is this young man who, when the holidays roll around, everyone is kind of leaves the prep school, and unfortunately for him, uh, his mother and her boyfriend are just busy, absconding, going on a romp of a vacation, and he's left behind. And accompanying him and in the holidays during the preparatory school is Paul Giamatti's character, a teacher of classics and a black kitchen staff member who specifically had a son that went to the school and unfortunately lost his life in the Vietnam War. And what is incredibly evident in that premise is that there is sort of the impact of real world events. There is this sort of underlying class analysis that's evident. And through the course of the movie, Paulo Giamatti's character, at least if you see the advertising, the marketing, he's portrayed as this very curmudgeonly, set aside, just sort of this vacuum of joy. He doesn't seem to be, he's often not well liked. But in watching the course of the movie, you admire and really sympathize with his characterization, his sense of conviction, and what really makes this film stand out is that there is a character drama that's ultimately about people who are dealt a bad hand from because of the circumstances they were born into or fell into, and how they seek solace among others that were impacted, and try to just see the light at the end of the tunnel. And
Yeah.
which is especially which this being the Christmas setting, there is a lot of precedent for stories set in Christmas for characters that have not been in the best situations economically, emotionally, whatnot, and finding solace, finding community, and having a sense of joy and reigniting or embracing the spirit of the holidays. Implicit, not as directly in this movie, but just there is sort of that implicit, sense of camaraderie, sense of togetherness that only the holidays can bring. And while that's there, there is this very insightful commentary in regards to the politics of the 70s that unfortunately I don't know how you feel, Tiki. It's still really resonant and relevant to our modern day.
Oh yeah, for sure. We can get into that a little bit. Okay, so yeah, just let's go ahead and break it down. And honestly, Rohit, what I would like to do is really kind of frame the conversation around how this movie functions as specifically a Christmas movie, because I got to tell you, it's really interesting because I feel like there is a Christmas tree literally on the poster, but by all intents and purposes, I feel like this is a much more layered and nuanced kind of film that just giving it the label of oh, it is a Christmas movie. I kind of feel like that's almost not giving it enough credit for what it is, because it's definitely set around Christmas time and, the actual Christmas of it all, which I'm sure we'll talk about, the events that actually go down around the Christmas holiday in this movie. I find it interesting that this movie structurally is very much kind of set around the Christmas season, but then the biggest, most dramatic plot points all take place on the actual holiday itself. So do you have any observations about just how this movie kind of functions apart from other Christmas movies and really like kind of does its own thing with like what could be a very tried genre of like the feel good coming together holiday movie.
I think what really makes it stand out as a Christmas movie is that it doesn't, throw Christmas aesthetics like at every corner and every second of the movie. It's like you see a Christmas tree in the background, you see snow. So what a good Christmas movie does is that it's not supposed to be showing you the Nutcracker, play all the
Mhm.
classic Christmas songs. It's supposed to be this is an setting the Christmas atmosphere as sort of the canvas, and you have the story that deals with the ideas and themes that we associate day to day with Christmas. And characters either trying to hold on to the spirit of Christmas, finding the spirit, getting back to the spirit, what have you. But but how it's done in this movie is that it's it's a sense of maintaining a feeling of hope and conviction in a very gritty, not necessarily like a Scorsese kind of a way, but a very realistic um, environment of 1970 America, with sort of the politics that are being mentioned, with sort of the underlying sort of class divisions among students, among faculty, and also even sort of aspects of a race that I would love to sort of unpack with the character of Miss Lamb, Mary Lamb.
Yeah, so Mary is definitely like I would say, obviously Giamatti is going to be the standout, and then you've also got I want to shout him out because he's just a Dominic Seza.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if I'm saying his last name right. As Angus Tully, I think he's like just like he's a star-making performance in this role, and I'm sure we can break down Giamatti and his dynamic as we go forward. But I absolutely agree that I think as far as the Christmas stuff goes specifically, I think Mary Lamb is definitely the kind of the heart and soul of the movie. She's very much like kind of like the embodiment of the poor and downtrodden on Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
So by all means, I can give you the floor on that if you have some things to explore about her and her role within the movie.
I mean, it's very interesting that like she's specifically the significant sole person of color in this movie, and she's specifically the
Mm, I mean, her and Joe, to be
her
fair.
her and Joe. But I think it's like in terms of prominence in the story, I think she's the kind of the person that
Yeah,
like
I'm just saying, Joe. I don't want to write Joe out though, because Joe has some really likable moments. I'm just saying.
no, oh no, I get that. I think it's just more about like sort of the dramatic pathos that we get at the very beginning, in regards to sort of her son being commemorated or remembered in the sermon, and sort of her conversations with Paul Giamatti's character, Mr. Hunnam, and the sort of tragedy of how she had this young upstart child that the father wasn't around. He put himself through school. He then got went to Vietnam and lost his life, and sort of the tragedy, especially for the holidays. Like she's without her son, and and she's basically day to day interacting with or servicing well-to-do kids that will like the song "Fortunate Son" won't have the will have the fortune of missing out on war. and
Sure, sure.
and I think that and I appreciate what really surprised me. And I think what I think what really wins the audience over, in my view, is how Mr. Hunnam is characterized. His sense of compassion to Mary Lamb.
I feel like the first real like sense of Paul's humanity that we get in the movie and like him being, more than just like a straight asshole of a teacher
Mhm.
is the moment where he's like really chastising that snot-nosed brat for criticizing the cooking.
Yeah, or no, or like the fact is like, oh, like she's so God, we have to see her moping around all the time.
Right,
And
right, right. And just him just really putting his fist down literally about that.
Yeah,
It shows that the man is stern, but he's also very compassionate in his convictions.
he's a man who values merit, who values like hard work, and
Uh
I
huh.
think, and that's kind of reflective in his disciplinary and actions is that he sees these people, he sees these students who have a silver spoon in their mouth, and it's his, I think, his responsibility in his view to push them to actually be worthy of the privileges that they're afforded to, or be cognizant, or be something more beyond just their economic background.
And then
And
Mary is just like, like you said, she's kind of like the embodiment of the like the lack of privilege, and just her having to literally like serve these uh by all intents and purposes, most of them are snot-nosed little brats in the school. I mean, some of them are nice kids, I'm sure, but they're rich kids, so there's definitely like a sense of elitism, a sense of entitlement, and like you said, even in some ways, some subtle racism elements going on in there.
yeah, and at the very least, like they might as well be living in two different planets. Like Mary,
Right.
like the people she spends time with is not the people that the kids are going to spend time with, and that's evident with the fact, like, think of the like extravagant like locations or countries that the parents are a lot of these kids are at, and
Uh-huh.
where kids go to. Whereas for Mary, she's just travels a few hours away and sees her, sister, and just has like this one tiny, not small, but sort of not a spacious bedroom in her sister's apartment. So just that contrast really hits home the point is that for the holidays, um, the
And the
emphasis.
holidays, just in general, are very much like if you are going through a hard time in your life, it's like it's very infamous in the mental health community as being like a trigger point for folks.
No, and it makes sense why, because this is a holiday in terms of the marketing, in terms of the advertising, just in terms of how
Hmm.
we talk about Christmas. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna be, I'll be spending time with my family, drinking eggnog, watching Christmas movies, opening presents, all that. If you have a strained relationship with your family, if your family's not there anymore, the holidays are kind of just a really tough time to go through. So Mary, she's basically, it's cold in New Hampshire. She's without her son, and she's just kind of bearing it, just through the sheer will, and that kind of, sort of like like a nun, like not devotion, but ability to steal through that turmoil until she breaks down later on in the movie with at the Christmas party.
Hmm.
uh, there is this kind of, I think I wanted to shout out Divine J. Randolph, or Joey Randolph, the actress who plays Mary Lamb. She has a level. I think what's I think what would be interesting when talking about this movie is that Paul Giamatti is easily the more, not showy, but the more out there performance, in the sense that like it's very obvious. You can see his mannerisms. He really puts it all. He really inhabits the scene. But I think for the actress who plays Mary Lamb, um, Divine Joy Randolph, she has this level of stoicism, this level of, there's you there's like some actors you can see there's like the wheels kind of turn in their head, and they just look at her demeanor, the way she holds herself and occupies space in a room. You feel like there's just not boiling anger, but just this grief that is just barely.
Yeah, just a palatable, like like that pit in your stomach loss that you feel.
Mhm.
And I am very fortunate in the fact that I've only ever lost one grandfather when I was like 12 years old, and
Mhm.
I've pretty much lost no other family members outside of that. So, I'm kind of like gearing up for like inevitably I know that other people in my life are going to go. And so it's like, that kind of quiet stoicism is like the only thing that I can really hope for as far as like my personal grieving process when I have to face that kind of stuff.
And even just beyond the initial loss, it's just like after times come by, like you'll maybe see something, experience a certain event, or or have something that will remind you of that person, and then just all floods back. So
Right,
it's not
right,
the
totally.
loss itself; it's just kind of like that sort of phantom pain, in your soul that sort of makes sense. And I think for Mary, just the fact that obviously in prior Christmases she would just be all smiles and just have her son around, and there'll be time spent with her family, friends, and have probably may not have like a big Christmas party, but there is an interior to life that the audience, an average audience member, can imagine of her with her son, and what she's going through now. It's devastating. And I think I appreciate the way the movie goes through her character. She doesn't feel like, oh, she's just kind of like, oh, poor old sad me. Like she's a real human being that has a sense of agency. Because I really think, because sometimes I feel like lesser directors, lesser writers, lesser creators in general, when they have such a character that has such tragic circumstances, they can really lay it on thick and not let the
And the
character.
tragic circumstances almost kind of like become the only thing about the
Yeah,
character.
it becomes like sort of a personality. That's their whole personality.
Sure. And I do think that the writing on her character very much like it does skate that line, because obviously her life right now is defined by the tragedy. But let me give you a good example of one of the kind of like very real world things that I really appreciate about her character. I really appreciate the whole like one of her escape mechanisms for the pain is just kind of like, like doing a little drinking at night and watching some comfort game shows.
Yeah,
It's like that sort of just like any little thing that could give you a little bit of comfort. I don't know, those kind of things, like I feel really give her character a lot of elements to her, like the way that her and Paul Giamatti kind of become drinking buddies throughout the movie.
or just the fact that like and near sort of the end of the movie when she holds hands with Angus,
Hmm.
like because the thing is at the beginning of the movie, it's sort of the framing of it is that like, oh, like we have to care for Mary Lamb, at the Christmas party, when she's not feeling well, all the other characters, in a show of compassion and show of concern, they consider her friends, they care for her. But what I really appreciate in that particular scene is that she's not an object of a pity, or she's not a person to be cared for. She was also a caregiver, a caretaker.
Totally, absolutely.
I think her, doing that, I think
And
there's
you could totally imagine, like, like with the ending of the movie, like Paul might be out of the school, but she's not. And you can totally imagine that there's going to be a relationship that goes on with those two, as Angus continues at the school. That's going to, there's definitely some camaraderie there by the end of the movie.
mm-hmm.
All right. Colby in the comments says, I stand by all three performances deserving Oscar nods. Well, I doubt Dominic Sessa will get one because of how competitive Best Supporting Actor is. Divine Joy Randolph better get nominated and maybe win. Yeah, I think Divine Joy Randolph is, I would say she's a front runner to at least get nominated, I would hope. I mean,
she is one of, like, how Variety does like their actors on actors series, like every year. She's actually on that, which was a pretty cool. I'm trying to think who is her counterpart that she's doing the actors and actors series, but I was really pumped to see her be in that, because I think that's reflective of how much critical attention and how much support there is for her performance, and I think she'll probably will get a nomination at the very least.
And Colby actually kind of brought this up last night on Memoirs, but the fact that I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name of the actress from Killers of the Flower Moon.
Lily Gladstone.
Yeah, the fact that Lily Gladstone is going for Best Actress and not Best Supporting Actress, I kind of feel like just her doing that kind of like leaves Best Supporting Actress kind of like wide open, because for a long time she was pretty much like, yeah, it's going to be Lily Gladstone who wins that,
Yeah.
So we'll see. The Oscars are a crazy thing. Dominic Sessa, do you want to kind of switch to him a little bit?
Yeah, I really appreciate. I saw sort of a not a direct criticism, but sort of this line that was kind of thrown at the movie, sort of the discourse of it is that like for Dominic Sessa's character Angus Tully, he is kind of in the mold of like a Holden Caulfield, just like a well-to-do kid that has some inner turmoil, and whether that's kind of a well-worn cliche. I will say that for Dominic Sessa, I appreciated that he played Angus as not like this, naive, doe-eyed, like rich kid, but he wasn't just like
He
a
wasn't
whole,
just a snot-nosed brat either.
yeah,
That's the
yeah,
thing. That's what I really like about his character is that he very much kind of like toes the line where he's rebellious and he's outspoken. Like I actually kind of, what I really dig about his dynamic with Giamattii is that it actually kind of reminds me of the dynamic that I had with my film teacher in high school, where my dynamic with the film teacher in high school is like he wants me to make like a 10-minute short film, and I come back with a fucking feature length found footage Cloverfield parody filmed at Six Flags. And it's one of those things where it's like clearly not the assignment. He can clearly appreciate the fact that I am taking the work seriously and I'm like pushing my artistic sensibilities, but at the same time, it's not what he asked for. And, like me doing this kind of like uproots the whole structure of his class, and
yeah.
so it kind of brought me back to those days a little bit, kind of like that push and pull you have with a teacher and like you obviously being like the student that is the most on the teacher's actual level intellectually. Code Geass, I need to, you know what, Code Geass, if it wasn't for other people being in that Cloverfield parody that I don't know if they would want themselves on the internet right now. I don't know. Maybe I should just ask permission. Like, hey, can I upload Cloverdale? I can upload a clip, Code Geass. I'll upload a clip. I'll tell you that. There is definitely a very memorable clip. It involves a train. I'll say that much. Anyways,
How cinematic? Was considering how
Rohit, it's actually for like a very amateur student found footage film shot at a theme park. It is surprisingly rather cinematic. The train scene, anyways.
God, I'll have to tell you about not my filmmaking experiences, but being involved in like sketch or video stuff. I'll tell this once after the
All right.
after the podcast. But what I think it's interesting you hit on that sort of dynamic and your the parallel that you see. I think what is interesting for Angus and Mr. Hunnam is that I think from Mr. Hunnam's mind, he sees a lot of himself in Angus. And I think especially when we learn about what happened in college, it definitely does kind of make a parallel with that. They're very intelligent, and because they're intelligent, they have a level of arrogance or conviction that can be off.
Sure.
And I think part of it is that like they're so smart that they know what to do, but they know what to do, but it's not like they're going to do it. And that's kind of interesting, character flaw. And it's something I can kind of relate to the sense is that where what you should do with your life or what you don't want to do with your life, but because of sort of how smart, how aware you are, you kind of had this level of like decision paralysis, or you just kind of are sort of
Paul
steady.
Giamatti is literally teaching at the same fucking like prep school that he went to school at himself. He never left. That's the whole like I love how that ties into the actual title of the movie, The Holdovers, where it's like Paul Giamatti himself is like the ultimate holdover from this school.
Think of the subject matter teaching. He's teaching classics. Like that's like the one subject where you're focusing on things that hold over from the past that kind of, that people discuss and review in terms of faces, in terms of murals, in terms of ancient stories and lore. It's just like Paul Giamatti's character, if you were to define it with one word, it's about maybe not even the word nostalgia, but just history. In the sense that like there is sort of this quote from a story, I think it's Shelby Foote or whoever. It's like history is not just the past. History is just what we make of it and where you live, and history is how we currently live. And I think for Mr. Hunnam, with what happened in his life and how things sort of end up the way it did, it's this kind of like ecosystem, for Mr. Hunnam, it sort of feels like that in a sense that even though physically he is an old man, and in certain aspects he is, he does feel like a very old cynical individual. The fact that he's kind of still teaching at the school, interacting with young people, there is kind of maybe not a direct one to one, but there is a level of like arrested development. And I think like that's something that Paul Giamatti's character realizes, especially in that scene when he sees his old friends from college and he has to lie to about what he's like.
I love the way that the lies kind of like come out throughout the movie and how Angus and Paul keep calling each other on it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, really well said about Paul. I think here's the thing, Rohit, with Alexander Payne, I think your next Alexander Payne movie absolutely has to be Sideways, like without question.
Mhm.
Especially because you were a Bay Area native at one point in time. You know the wine country life. You know that culture. I'm sure you do. Anyways.
Well, I'm also like in a profession that is exposure to alcohol, especially wine, or even just my parents have like a wine cooler thing. So
Right.
yeah, and just the kind of like snootiness is like, yeah, I think I'll definitely.
Rohit, I would be very, very curious about your thoughts on Sideways. I'm actually pretty sure the 20th anniversary is next year, so we'll have to make that happen.
Okay, yeah, I'd be down to see it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Paul Giamatti has been nominated for an Oscar, but hasn't won. Yeah. Here's the thing: he got snubbed from Sideways. He wasn't even nominated for Sideways, and he absolutely should have been. So I honestly think that narrative is going to make him like the front runner to win Best Actor this year. At least I hope so.
You know what? Well, he's got a lot. He's got a lot of tough competition.
He's got competition, but I think out of the competition, I think he kind of rises to the like. Who do you think is the biggest competition for him?
Cillian Murphy.
Ooh, man, yeah, that's a 2-horse race right there, man. It really is.
Yeah, I would have said Joaquin, but I watched Napoleon, and man, that was probably one of my.
Napoleon's not getting nominated for anything. Maybe some technical awards. That's it.
Yeah. Whoa, man, that is. What wasn't bad was like, yeah, I watched it with my just a brief aside. So I watched it on Thanksgiving weekend with my family, and my dad was a huge Napoleon fan, and who like he like how sort of the trend was that's like, oh, what's your like Roman Empire? My dad's Roman Empire is Napoleon, and when he saw the movie, the end's like, they just didn't capture the complexity and honestly, like, I don't. You've seen Death of Stalin, right?
What? Sorry.
Have you seen the movie Death of Stalin? Or like,
no, I've heard of it. It's on my to-watch list. I've definitely heard of it.
Okay, I think it's like if Napoleon. You haven't watched Napoleon yet.
Not yet, no.
Okay, Napoleon felt.
I'm actually kind of holding out for the 4-hour cut, which, believe it or not, I hope is going to help the pacing issues. Which I know is like a weird thing to say, but you get what I'm saying, right?
I don't know if it's going to be better because honestly, with what I saw, it's like it felt to me. I'll try to finish this thought. Napoleon felt to me like some scenes like, oh, this is Ridley Scott of Gladiator. And then some scenes like, oh, this is Ridley Scott of House of Gucci. And it's just like, oh my god. Yeah, you'll get what I mean, but if you ever see there's just certain directing decisions, certain choices, and how Joaquin's portraying Napoleon that's like, oof.
All right. Well, anyways, back on this movie. Okay, so let's see. I'm curious what you think of like the first act of the movie, where it's like the other students are involved. Because I will say that plot wise, I almost kind of think that wasn't necessarily needed. I mean, I feel like it sets up a couple things. Like you do get that one interaction from the real snot nosed brat.
Mhm.
That like the the main character wouldn't say, like he would just, for as much as a rebel as he wouldn't get that in your face about it. He wouldn't be that rude. He as a
Brady,
character, he always
Brady,
has compassion.
Brady is the guy who's like the real jerk to Angus.
So it's like I feel like you kind of need some of that, but I don't know. How do you feel about structurally the fact that like the first act we get that little like group of kids? It's almost kind of like it almost kind of feels like a Wes Anderson movie in that act, just because of the the cynical children in a
Well,
way.
considering like the movie is very stylistically based off of movies in the 70s, and 70s movies have like a lot more of a deliberate pacing as compared to modern movies. And I think the way the movie structured, like the first act could almost feel like a bit of a vignette or like a slice of day in the life. And I think that's kind of by design, to kind of just sort of let the audience kind of marinate in the environment. And I think
Okay,
it's important for Angus to be with the kids because after that, it's just him with the adults. So I think it was really interesting to see how Angus like socializes among the kids
sure.
and how he socializes with the adults.
Yeah, Colby makes a point here. He says, I think it was super necessary. It made Angus feel even more alone because even though they weren't his friends, they were his age and could relate to him more than the teacher and the cook.
Oh, so my friend, so I watched with a friend, and he and I made this observation after the movie's done. In regards to that, it's like I think the kids being there with Angus, it leads to sort of this tragic comedy ending for the first act, where it's like, oh, they're like the helicopter flies in for that one guy who has long hair, and here's the thing, the the school couldn't reach his parents,
Uh-huh.
but the school somehow reached the Mormon kid's parents who were
I
doing
know.
a
I thought that was a little bit of
way,
a buy. Yeah.
and then they were able to reach the Korean kid's parents in Korea. For some
Right,
reason.
right.
And it's just like I think that's both comedic in the sense like, oh, these parents don't really like Angus's mom is just not at all.
But it's like I will say with the Angus stuff, it's like I do really like how we keep the cards close to the chest with exactly what's going on with his family situation, and then
Yeah,
when that's
because
revealed, which we'll get to when we talk about the Boston stuff,
here,
it really does hit home even more.
hmm and it and
So
it's and it's certainly kind of like retroactively or retrospectively, hence the title of the podcast, make kind of provides an interesting lens or read on Angus's actions and Angus's sort of like feelings about himself among his peers.
totally, totally. All right. So let's see. Before we get to the Boston stuff, the one other thing I want to point out, I want to highlight is I want to talk about the Academy. Make sure I get the name right. Barden Academy.
Yes.
Just being a character in its own right, and I think really like obviously this film, like as we're kind of like sort of building to here, Christmas does become a big plot point within the film. But like even before we reach Christmas, even just like the days leading up to Christmas, man, you feel that New England winter atmosphere, and it is just so crisp and like comfortable. But it's one of those things, Rohit, where it's like I'm sure if I've never been to the East Coast during the winter at all. Like I have not experienced that level of snow. Like I've driven through the Sierra Nevadas when it's snowing. That's about it. But even then, I haven't like stayed there. I haven't like lived it. So I don't know. For me, I found the snow and the winter element of this very comfortable. But I imagine if you are on the East Coast, it's probably a little bit of like, oh dear God, this is the shit we have to deal with year after year.
People in Minnesota, it's like, It is what it is.
Right.
That's no. I really appreciate. I think that's kind of the. It helps to kind of have like the prep school in New England because I think there is. It kind of reminds me. I just thought of it. It's like, have you ever heard of Andover Academy?
Sounds familiar.
It's a prep school in Massachusetts, and
Okay.
specifically, it's like a prep school that a lot of like elite families or like well-to-do families send their kids to. And one of the alumni from that Andover Academy is Mark Zuckerberg.
Oh my
So
god.
yeah, no. So I think it's like I really wonder for Alexander Payne if he maybe looked at that school or just kind of like the preparatory environment in New England. I think part of what makes this movie work the way it does that like Barton Academy, there is this like enveloping feeling of tradition, and New England
Oh,
is like one like New England, the states of New England are some of the oldest states, one of the oldest buildings,
right, right.
and so there is that level of history and tradition that kind of
And then go ahead. Sorry.
it sort of is like kind of the perfect environment for someone like Paul, who is very much about history, you know,
And then
ancient.
I love how Paul just very much like again like the title of the holdovers just he relates so well to him personally
Mhm.
because it's like his very existence is like tied to this academy where it's like the only thing he'll really do that is not at the academy is just going into town on occasion for for groceries and stuff and the occasional doctor's appointment and stuff but I really feel like that kind of like like the mix of like Paul really viewing it is by all intents and purposes his home, and
Mhm.
then Angus viewing it as essentially his prison.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that Rohit, I think the biggest laugh in the movie for me was the whole like, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't aware it was still Nazi Germany. Oh
um,
my god. And just the way that he delivers that, just all the sarcasm and cynicism, like I didn't know it was still Nazi Germany.
I what Paul Giamatti does great as an actor. He plays the hell out of indignation and just like anger, down in like the shouting, yelling anger. He does that as well, but like just the level of like frustration and just
Simmering
I'm done
rage.
with your shit.
Simmering rage is how I describe it.
Yeah, or simmering. Yeah, that's like
Uh-huh.
I like liar liar
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
John Adams. Like really
Uh-huh.
like or just Paul Giamatti just knows how to play just like indignation like so well. It's like no, this
Again, this is another reason why you need to see Sideways.
oh yeah, I'll definitely will plan to see that. And I think that indignation. I feel like for a lesser actor or an actor that isn't Paul Giamatti, that could come off as tiring and off and make such a character unlikable. But I think with how Paul Giamatti like carries himself, the way he like it sort of feels that the indignation is kind of like a self defense, like sort of a defense mechanism.
Oh, absolutely. It's that way. Yeah, that's absolutely the vibe I got from his character.
Hmm. And for Angus, him being rebellious is his own defensive mechanisms. It's kind of just like kind of this like unstoppable force meets this immovable object, and that dynamic just kind of carries over for a lot of the film until like sort of near the end of the second act, the beginning of the third act. So
Uh-huh. All right, so Christmas comes to the academy. We get the great little Charlie Brown tree moment, which is awesome.
mhm.
Just the reveal of it. He's so proud of it, Rohit.
Yeah, it's like Paul is like he's in a well-to-do environment, like a very prestigious school, but Paul himself is not like an elite man. He's into classics, but I think he's into classics because it's a fascinating area that explores the human condition rather than this is just something that rich people do, like read Alexander, like learn about Alexander the Great and play tennis.
Sure, sure. Yeah, no, I mean, he doesn't really, he considers himself educated, but I definitely think you're onto that, where he doesn't consider himself elite. And as a matter of fact, I feel like he has a big problem with elitism, which goes back to like his whole life almost, with the, like with the students that, have that the whole thing that kind of kicks off the movie, where the student is like basically like buying their way into a good grade. And he refuses to go along with it, which is kind of like the catalyst for the whole plot for him.
And considering the context of it being in the Vietnam War, with sort of the prevailing sentiment of like well-to-do families and well-to-do boys, not having to face the horrors of war, and working class people kind of seeing that savage, ravages.
With Mary Lamb, of course, being the best example of that, like the face of that in the movie.
Yeah, like I really appreciate there was sort of this one monologue that Paul had about this country was sort of the rich get richer, things don't make sense, and really he's an intellectual and he is against anti-intellectualism. I think it's just kind of a matter of for him, like being educated, being knowledgeable. It's not in a result of being well to do, as a result of being considerate and caring about knowledge and wisdom. And a lot of these kids, like, they just take that for granted, and I think that kind of raises his ire, because I think for him, because the fact that, like, when you really think about it, because what we know about is what really happened to him in college, this is it. And so if he doesn't doesn't take it for granted, because he was given an opportunity, he was given a chance to make something of himself. And I think the way he looks at the students, it's like, you don't know how good you have it. That's
Right.
kind of
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Should we talk about the Boston stuff?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, so first of all, I just think the montage is just freaking delightful of them just going around doing the Christmas, the standard Christmas stuff, the ice skating, the window shopping, I love the setting of the book, like the open air book market where it's like snowing. I don't know, just like the way that Boston's filmed. Like I've never really had a desire to go to Boston, but I will admit it does look like a charming little place to check out for the holidays. You know what? It actually kind of gave me the vibe of Rohit just a little bit. This is going to sound kind of silly. It kind of gave me that same sense of excitement of like, oh boy, we're going to the big city for Christmas. Is get ready for it. Home Alone 2.
I knew you were gonna. I knew. No,
but right? Am I not wrong? Am I not wrong? It's like, because it builds up to it. It builds up to it.
Honestly, like New York, like Christmas New York, never looks any better than how it's depicted in Home Alone 2.
I still stand by Home Alone 2 as a more, I don't know if it's a better movie, but for me it's more memorable than the original.
Yeah, because you got freaking Tim Curry. Of course it's gonna be. Tim Curry is like the boss. But no, I think you're onto something. I think part of it's just like Boston is kind of this very, it's not like super urbanized in the same degree as like Chicago or New York City, even Philly. So because of that, I think it's just kind of more, there's a more quaint like quality to it.
The history too, of course, the colonial element.
Yeah. I was gonna say earlier though, that's like regards like, oh, this could be a fun place to go, and I was gonna say to you, Tiki, it's like until you meet Boston sports fans, then the illusion kind of.
Yeah.
or just.
What do you mean you don't like the Red Sox?
You talking smack about Tom Brady?
Oh my god, dude! Oh my god.
That's the Roman Empire of the city of Boston. Tom Brady.
Right. I can see that. Oh man. Little Blue, just to shout it out. Yes, I do think Paul Giamattii played a really good Santa in Fred Claus. I liked how curmudgeon-y he was in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
He was a very prickly Santa, but still lovable at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Speaking of Fred Claus, Fred Claus is an underrated Christmas film. I love that they had Kevin Spacey as a Superman fan. Spacey is great in the film. Why do we keep bringing up Kevin Spacey, Rohit? This is a running thing. The man keeps worming his way
Wait,
into our conversations.
wait, just you and me? What are you and me
No,
discussing?
not you and me, but just the podcast in general. He keeps coming up.
When did Spacey got mentioned prior to
He
this?
got mentioned like twice last night on Memoirs.
Oh, well. I guess so long as we don't discuss about any films or subject matter that can relate to Spacey's filmography, we're good.
All right. Well, Jesus Christ. I was just having this conversation with a friend the other day where it's like Kevin Spacey seems like the type of actor where it's like the roles that he did almost seem like specifically chosen to be like they're gonna look back on me and they're going to see that I was the evil man the whole time and every one of my roles is going to reflect that.
Oh God, this is actually kind of a funny coincidence in light of this being a seasonal Shenanigans. Do you remember when Spacey did like his like Frank Underwood shit
Yes, of
for
course. How
Christmas?
could I
And
forget?
I was like, oh my God.
Like, what are you doing? Oh man. Anyways, all right. Let's get off of the Kevin Spacey talk, please. Okay. Yeah, Colby. I definitely would not drive in Boston. I do not trust like driving in any big city. I would be a nightmare. I imagine.
It's less with the quality of the drivers in Boston because my dad I drove in Boston. It's more just like the quality or the way the roads are kind of
That makes
not
sense. That makes sense.
straightforward. Yeah, so which I think it makes sense because Boston's an older city, so infrastructure wise, it hasn't really
Sure. All right. Well, let's talk about the big kind of like the thing in the movie that's almost kind of like the twist that punches you in the gut. Angus's father, who up until this point we just kind of assumed was dead,
Mhm.
is not dead, but he kind of lost his mind in kind of like an ambiguous kind of fashion. It was kind of like early onset Alzheimer's or something to that extent. But yeah, Rohit, I did have a great grandmother who was like very deep in the throes of Alzheimer's by the time she passed. She was over 100 years old by the time she passed.
Oh, wow.
So the whole lot, like, I thought it was freaking brilliant and so true to life. It's like they know exactly what card to pull with this sort of situation. It's just one line, but it tells you everything you need to know about the situation, which is when the dad is like, he's not listening to what Angus is actually saying at all. He's just stuck in his own delusional world. And he's like, I think they're putting something in my food. Like, Rohit, it's like, I don't know if you've ever gone through someone with Alzheimer's, but it's like that one line it encapsulates what the disease does to you.
Mhm.
It's like all your trust, everything is just thrown out the window. It's you are just basically left to kind of like fend for yourself. All you have is your own mind, and even your own mind is turning against you. So yeah, man, I was just very impressed that they were able to say so much with so little in that one line delivery and have it be like the gut punch of the film, hands down.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to say about the reveal?
I think I think the way Dominic Sessa just played that, not the real, but just like how he reacted to his dad saying that. It was really heartbreaking to see, and obviously it's just commendable. Just emoting from Dominic Sessa as an actor. Uh, I I think what was interesting is that when you look back at it, because I remember talking to my friend about it, it's like, and he and I both remembered that when Angus was talking to his mom, they didn't use dead. It's like, oh, since your father was dead, like since your father was gone. But
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
but I think, and I kind of imputed in my head, it's like, oh, he's passed away, because that's just always, and maybe that was, and I think with the fact that Mary lost her kid, I think probably the movie's kind of playing a bit of a trick where it's like, oh, like one person lost a parent, one person lost a child. They'll connect and sort of have like a surrogate parent child thing. But no, like his dad is still alive, but it's just mentally not there. And I think what
I
happens
mean,
is
in a way, it's almost like worse than losing a parent, right?
well, in the sense, yeah, in the sense that like however your parent passes away, ideally and hopefully or likely, there was the person that you spend most of your life growing up with. And whereas for Angus's dad, um, you really kind of wonder how long did Angus really had his dad in sort of the state he was in, versus now his mind's just kind of completely gone.
Right, right. So yeah, very powerful stuff. Also, um the whole thing where it's kind of like revealed that that's like one of the big driving forces for Angus, doing what he does and having the attitude that he has is that he's like getting terrified that he's going to end up like him.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's definitely some really deep cutting shit right there. That's kind of like the root of a lot of my anxiety too. Not so much like I don't have a family member per se that I can compare myself to,
Hmm.
but like the whole thought of like, what if I'm just like, what if at the end of my life I'm just babbling incoherently in a hospital somewhere and no one is around to actually care. It's a terrifying thought, Rohit, and I feel like it's very eloquently explored
So,
in the Angus character.
so that actually reminds me of something. There is a. Have you heard of Mitchell and Webb? They're like this British comedy duo that do these sketches. And there's one sketch you can search on YouTube. It's like Mitchell and Webb, Sherlock Holmes, and
Uh-huh.
basically the conceit of it is like, oh, Sherlock Holmes is really elderly. He's in a nursing home, and he's kind of has like a bit of Alzheimer's dementia. He's kind of it's really it's like really comedic in nature. Like John Watson's visiting him, and it's like, oh, he's just being funny, guy. And then at the end, he like not breaks character, but just kind of regains a bit of like lucidity. And Sherlock looks at John. It's like, my mind's in a fog, John. I can't see. And just that dramatic end, and then he goes back to like,
Right, right, right.
it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh my god, like that.
It's
Like,
terrifying, man. It's truly terrifying to think about.
mhm.
All right. Well, ooh, let's get on to brighter subjects here. So yeah, I really love the catharsis of going from where we start with the characters in the first act to the payoff of the New Year's Eve and Paul letting Angus light a firecracker off in the building. That to me is just one of the biggest, like it just puts a dumb freaking big smile on your face. It's just
Mhm.
it's hard not to be charmed by that.
Oh yeah, and the fact that it's just Angus, Paul, um, Mary, and then Joe. They're just all kind of like this very small, intimate group. Just having a bit of fun and in the New Year's time. I think that's kind of very much the feeling of Christmas, New Year's, where it's you have the big families, you have the big parties and whatnot, but there's always just the quiet moments where it's just you and a few close people, kind of just commiserating and experiencing the joy of the holidays.
And that to me, like as far as this being a Christmas movie goes, even though it's technically a New Year's scene, that
Mhm.
to me is probably like the moment for me that really stands out about above everything else. Just that sense of community, dare I say, found family.
Yeah.
Joe also has a really fun line in this moment, probably my favorite Joe moment, where Angus is like, "Where do you stand on firecrackers, Joe?" And Joe's like, "As far as possible."
Yeah, that does.
I love that. I love that.
Oh, a favorite Joe line is like my favorite Joe line is that he got a gift for was the scene where he gets a gift for Mary, and it's like, oh, Mary, Mary's like, oh, Joe, I didn't give you anything, and it's like, and Joe's like, you always give me with that smile, and it's like
uh,
such a smooth line, but it's such an endearing line. uh and I think it's like it's a move, like this movie has this I think there's this kind of this earnestness to the movie that's kind of grounded or leveled with sort of the cynicism of the real world, the 1970s, and just like the politics of well-to-do parents kind of dictating how things go, regardless of actual merit or regardless of actual substance, and the way things end off. Uh, it was really a great moment of clarity and conviction on the part of Paul to really stand up for Angus in that scene when he's confronted by Angus's mom and
Uh,
the queen.
yeah, so we'll get to that. I just want to acknowledge Colby here. He's saying my favorite Joe scene is when he just sets the bucket and mop next to Angus after revealing someone puked in the gym. And I gotta tell you guys, like I've seen this movie twice now. The only reason I saw it twice is because I think I actually told you this specifically, Rohit, where the first time I saw it, there was like this gaggle of middle-aged women who were just yapping throughout the whole thing, and I was like, okay, no, I need to see this again just to actually experience it.
Yeah.
And I will say that upon seeing it twice, I think the Joe character really does stand. He's one of those movie characters where it's like he doesn't have a lot of screen time, but every scene that he does have just really elevates the scene, like every moment. It's like I really feel like he's just like kind of a secret ingredient to the ensemble almost, where it's like, compared to the three leads, his role is really not flashy at all, but I really feel like a lot would be missing if he wasn't there,
He's
I
a
feel
really
like
good,
he's just like a grounding element to everything.
he's a really good support player because I think those three. I think because we don't really know much about Joe's background,
Uh-huh.
but because of that, we kind of have Joe be just like, he's in Joe like Mary Lamb's like similar economic situation. He's like a janitor and all that stuff. But I think his attitude, the way he carries himself, like he's someone that anyone would want to be around. And I
Sure.
think that helps to kind of for the characters that the three main leads have sort of their dramatic neurosis, their journeys that they go through. Joe is kind of the light that maybe not like a Jiminy Cricket, but just someone that
He is kind of a Jiminy Cricket, though. I mean, no, not functionally, no. But I see what you're saying, though. I see what you're saying with that
yeah
comparison.
he makes the journey more bearable for these three.
Uh-huh.
And I think like for a movie, because the thing is with sort of the backgrounds of these characters and like the setting, it could get very sort of morose and kind of a drudge. But I think just him keeping things light, he is kind of the character that will is able to bring the level of light. And I think for if he's not there, those three might have struggled to find a lot of joy and a lot of happiness, throughout the holidays. Because I think all three of them have issues to deal with.
Yeah, well said. All right, so yeah, honestly, structurally, this is kind of like my biggest sticking point for this, like going from like I do think it's a great movie, but I think the ending stuff is kind of where I get into like, all right, this is a little conventional territory here,
Mhm.
where it's basically just kind of like wrapping everything up. And Paul Giamatti does, I think Giamatti leaving the school is a good place to end his character.
Yeah.
I think my big sticking point, and this might just be me being like, frankly, being a cynical asshole who can't see the good in stuff. I
Mhm.
don't necessarily think we need the scene where Angus and Paul are like reaffirming what they mean to each other at the end. Because I honestly think it would be more powerful if they just never spoke to each other after that. Like after the meeting in the in the hallway where Paul does what he does, because he really does lay on his sword for Angus. I mean, he really takes a bullet for the kid. And so I think the last scene with the two of them is very nice. It's very much like kind of like tying up their relationship with a nice bow, but it's a little Hollywood for me. It rings a little false, if that makes sense. It's a
No, I,
little conventional.
I think we're getting at is that they could have like Paul could have went on, and I think they could have both maybe looked at photos or maybe looked at like reminisce or
Or
through.
maybe even just have like a knowing glance or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just saying going the full blown like spelling out essentially the themes of the
No,
movie in the
that
final conversation, you know?
that's actually I can totally see where it comes. It's not. I think you're being
It's like
cynical.
the one point in the movie where I'm like, okay, this is getting a little bit too conventional for my taste, you
No,
know?
I don't think you're being cynical. I think where you're getting at is that this movie doesn't like it's a Christmas movie that doesn't follow the Christmas tropes, and then at the end it kind of does, where it's like, oh,
Uh,
like, here's the lesson of the movie. And the thing is, the movie is not like super subtle in parts, but it's I think it's kind of like it's not like subtle and unsubtle. There's like a
it's not
spectrum.
spoon feeding you though, and I feel
Yeah,
like the ending is kind of spoon feeding you a
no,
little bit.
I get what you mean by that. Um, no, I think it would have been honestly, I kind of wish there was maybe a thing where like he gives a look and then maybe hands something to Angus and for Angus to look at later on, maybe like a book or something like
Uh,
or something
he
of like
just gives him another copy of the book.
oh man, no, yeah.
That's a great gag, isn't it?
Oh, that is a great get. No, I think actually it's like
Although you know what? I actually, now that I think about it, I honestly think that the perfect note to end out their relationship on would have been the whole thing of like which eye to look into.
oh that's yeah.
I honestly think that's where they should have ended, and then maybe have a moment between them at the very end where they're just looking at each other, you know, and acknowledging each other. It's just the conversation is just it rings a little hollow for me.
Yeah.
But alas, I still love where the characters end up. I do love the idea of Paul very much kind of like using Angus like in a way they help each other because Angus needs Paul to fall on his sword for him to
Mhm.
stay in the academy because the academy is clearly in the long run a good thing for Angus and where Angus
Uh,
should be.
the what was do you remember what the line was when he said to the dean? Where it's like his final send off. It's like you're basically like a
Oh, like yeah, I
female
don't remember
cancer.
exactly what it is. I know what you're talking about.
It,
You're
it,
like the human equivalent of testicular cancer or something like
yes,
that.
yes, yes. Oh man.
And then you know, like I really do love the idea of Angus being the element in Paul's life that actually gets him to leave the academy and kind of start a new chapter in his life. That
Mhm.
is the part of the ending that I really do love thematically. I think it's a perfect place to end the characters. You know what I mean?
And you know what's really great about that for Paul is that like the thing is, in Christmas movies, like it's not always the case for each and every one, but there is sort of this idea where it's like, oh, a character has kind of lost the spirit, lost the joy, or lost something, and they regain it back through the holidays. Whereas for Paul's character, he he's he's Robert. The thing that was his home was taken away from him, and it's actually kind of a moment of you know of optimism or joy for him
Yeah,
because
totally.
and now because it's like instead of just being because what was his home is really like both Angus and Paul were right is that Barney County is both a home and a prison and for for Paul he was a willing prisoner and now the fact that he's fired and he's kind of left to sort of explore the world he can really the lie that he presented to his colleagues he can actually make into a reality however that successful it is he's for all the issues for Paul as a character and as a person um he has a sense of of joy and conviction for just understanding the human condition through the classic. So I think where he ends off, it's like he's in a better path than he was
Yeah,
before.
well said. All right, you got any final thoughts?
Before I get into final thoughts, I had this little thing for Paul's character. The fact that he drank a lot whiskey, and to think about he has a specific condition where he smells like fish or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever think, or did you ever thought that like he for his drinking, like whiskey and all that stuff. It's to mask the smell of his fish smell.
I never really thought about that. Honestly, with the whiskey thing, the only thing I thought of was like this must be intentional because like in Sideways he's totally like not Merlot. He fucking hates Merlot. Do
He's
not
Pinot
ever
Noir.
serve him Merlot in Sideways.
Yeah.
But Pinot Noir, his drink of choice is Pinot Noir, and in this I believe he has a whiskey of choice in this, right?
Yeah.
I forget exactly what it is, but it very much reminded me of the Pinot thing from Sideways.
Well, no, I was thinking like functionally. I think for him, it's like he drowns his sorrows, but a second, like the smell of whiskey can probably mask the smell of his like.
Sure.
Well, yeah.
I could see that.
But
I am glad you brought up the whiskey thing, just because, like I said, it is kind of a fun little parallel to Sideways.
Yeah.
All right.
I think they keep. There's like a fun thing that Keeper Colby just mentioned. Right in the bottom of the guard. So one moment.
Oh, the Cherries Jubilee scene. Yeah. That was just a great moment because it's very much just kind of like a really like really there's following the rules and then there's just being an asshole about it. Like, come on, man. Although I will say, Rohit, I have had a pastry from Epcot that had like an alcoholic cream in it, and that thing got me straight up drunk.
Yeah, it's kind of, you have to really be careful about how much alcohol you put into like pastries and stuff like that, because sometimes
right. So it's like, so on some level, I kind of get it with the Cherries Jubilee. It's like their argument is like, oh come on, the alcohol's just for flavor, but it's like no. Some dishes that are cooked with alcohol, you really do feel the alcohol.
and also like Angus, like not only is he just young, but also he's like a pretty skinny guy. So like depending on how much alcohol you put,
That's true. That's very true. All right. Okay, so yeah, final thoughts, Rohit.
It's a delightful film. It's one of my favorite films of the year. It is a great character drama that has the Christmas atmosphere and vibes work as a setting that enhance and not overpower the interpersonal dynamics of the characters. There's just great writing, great acting, and it's a movie that I think for even people that are not like cinephiles or just average everyday people, I think when this movie comes out on PVOD or on streaming, I think this will gain a really big audience or significant audience, because
I think this movie is going to be huge on streaming over the holiday season, and I could actually even see it like sticking around in theaters over the holiday season as well.
Yeah.
Like I see this movie having some legs for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, final thoughts on my end. I think this is a great one to kick off seasonal shenanigans with, because it's kind of like a little like in between Thanksgiving and Christmas movie where it's kind of like that Spielberg analogy where it's like, you know, like Jurassic Park is a Spielberg movie. Munich is a movie directed by Steven Spielberg, and I feel like, you know, like something like The Grinch is a Christmas movie. The Holdovers is a movie that happens to be about Christmas. You know, it's like that kind of distinction, you know? Like, it doesn't shove the holiday in your face, but the holiday and the spirit of the holiday and the actual, you know, meaningful parts of the holiday are very much there and present in the characters and the themes. And the actual holiday itself does become very plot relevant with the Boston stuff. So yeah, I think overall I think it's going to be a classic as far as like holiday movies go. I think it's already kind of like it's kind of got an instant classic kind of status going on already with how much people are liking it. So
Oh yeah.
all right. So we want to thank Little Blue, Code Geass, and Keeper Colby for joining us in the comments. As always, we always appreciate the engagement. Thank you for joining me, Rohit. I always appreciate it.
Same as well.
All right. Well, folks, it's time to dash away all as we wave goodbye don't you cry. We'll be back again next time for even more seasonal shenanigans. La 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 la.
I didn't realize this was Nazi Germany.
What is this, Nazi Germany?